Ever wonder which Elvis songs haven't aged well? Ready to revisit the King's catalog with fresh ears? Elvis Presley remains one of the most iconic figures in music history, a cultural phenomenon whose influence spans decades beyond his untimely death in 1977. His sultry voice, provocative hip movements, and undeniable charisma changed the face of popular music forever. Yet while many of Elvis's greatest hits continue to sound as fresh and vibrant today as they did when first released, other tracks in his extensive catalog bear the unmistakable taint of their era. The world has changed dramatically since Elvis first shocked audiences in the 1950s. Musical production techniques have evolved, lyrical themes have shifted, and cultural sensitivities have been transformed. What once seemed cutting-edge can now feel quaint, and what was once acceptable in mainstream music might now raise eyebrows. Even legends like Elvis aren't immune to the relentless march of time. Let's take a nostalgic yet honest journey through 8 Elvis tracks that, while important pieces of music history, sound particularly dated to modern ears. From outdated production techniques to lyrical content that reflects a bygone era, these songs provide fascinating windows into the past while demonstrating just how far music has come since the King ruled the charts. Number 1. Do the Clam. 1965. Is there anything more quintessentially mid-1960s than a dance craze song? Could any modern artist survive releasing something called Do the Clam? By 1965, Elvis Presley was deep into his movie career, churning out formulaic films with equally formulaic soundtracks. Do the Clam appeared in the Beach Party movie Girl Happy and embodies everything that made Elvis's film period so commercially successful, yet artistically. The song was explicitly created to launch a dance craze, something that happened with remarkable frequency during the early to mid-1960s. The production on Do the Clam sounds like a time capsule from another era. The backing vocals have that distinct 1960s sheen, overly bright and artificially cheerful. The horn section sounds thin by today's standards, lacking the punch and presence that modern production techniques could provide. The reverb applied to Elvis's voice creates a hollow sound that immediately places the recording squarely in its era. Lyrically, the song is as simple as it gets. Do the clam, grab your barefoot baby by the hand. The entire concept revolves around instructions for a dance move that has long since disappeared from the collective memory. Dance instruction songs were immensely popular during this period, from the twist to the mashed potato. But the format has virtually disappeared from contemporary music, making Do the Clam sound particularly antiquated. The song's arrangement feels formulaic and assembly line, which is unsurprising, given that Elvis's movie soundtracks were often created with efficiency rather than artistic merit in mind. The backing track lacks the raw energy of Elvis's earlier work and the sophisticated musicality of his later recordings. It sits uncomfortably in the middle, too polished to be authentic rock and roll, yet too simplistic to be considered nuanced pop. What makes Do the Clam especially dated isn't just its sound, but its context within Elvis's career. This period represented a significant creative drought for the King, when his artistic output was largely dictated by movie contracts rather than musical inspiration. While Beatles were revolutionizing music with albums like Rubber Soul, Elvis was recording novelty songs for beach movies, a stark contrast that only heightens how out of step the Clam feels with the cutting-edge music of its own time, let alone today's standards. Number 2. Yoga is as yoga does. 1967. When was the last time you heard a major music star mock Eastern spiritual practices? Does anyone remember when yoga was considered exotic enough to be comedy fodder? If there's one track that perfectly encapsulates how cultural attitudes have shifted since Elvis's heyday, it's Yoga is as Yoga Does, from the 1967 film Easy Come, Easy Go. The song represents a perfect storm of dated elements, cultural insensitivity, tired comedy, and the nadir of Elvis's movie soundtrack period. In this duet with actress Elsa Lanchester, Elvis portrays yoga as a bizarre foreign curiosity rather than the mainstream wellness practice it has become today. The song relies on exoticized stereotypes of Eastern practices, treating them as punchlines rather than legitimate spiritual traditions. Lines like "twist yourself into a knot and tie it with a bow" demonstrate a surface-level understanding of yoga that feels painfully ignorant by contemporary standards. The production quality sounds thin and hastily assembled, clearly a product of Elvis's movie soundtrack assembly line. The instrumentation attempts to create an exotic sound through the use of sitars and tambourines, but the effect comes across as a cartoonish caricature of Indian music. This type of cultural appropriation for comedic effect was commonplace in 1960s entertainment, but strikes modern listeners as tone-deaf and insensitive. Elvis himself sounds disengaged throughout the recording, a common issue during his movie years, when he was often recording songs that were far beneath his considerable talents. His delivery lacks conviction, suggesting that even the king himself wasn't particularly impressed with the material. The forced laughter and spoken asides between Elvis and Lanchester feel awkward and scripted, lacking any genuine sense of fun or spontaneity. The historical context makes Yoga is as Yoga Does even more jarring. Released the same year as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, when many Western musicians were genuinely exploring Eastern philosophical and musical traditions, this track stands as an example of treating other cultures as novelties rather than sources of legitimate inspiration. The Beatles were studying with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi while Elvis was making yoga jokes in a forgettable movie, a stark illustration of how disconnected he had become from the evolving music scene. Today, with yoga studios in virtually every American town and Eastern spiritual practices widely respected and adopted, Yoga is as Yoga Does feels like an Beckett from a less culturally aware time. Its dated production, cultural insensitivity, and forced humor make it perhaps one of Elvis's most cringe-inducing recordings for modern listeners. Number 3. Old McDonald, 1966. Remember when adult musicians could record children's nursery rhymes without irony? How did Elvis end up singing about farm animals at the height of his fame? When Elvis Presley recorded Old McDonald for the soundtrack of his 1966 film Double Trouble, the king of rock and roll found himself about as far from his rebellious roots as possible. This awkward adaptation of a beloved children's nursery rhyme stands as one of the clearest examples of how Elvis's film period often forced him to record material that did his talents no justice and has aged particularly poorly. The production of Old MacDonald sounds precisely like what it is, a mid-1960s attempt to make a children's song sound hip and contemporary. The backing track features the standard instrumental lineup of Elvis's movie soundtrack recordings from this period. Competent but uninspired studio musicians playing an arrangement that feels manufactured rather than organic. The song is punctuated by cartoonish animal sounds that might have seemed playful in 1966, but come across as gimmicky and juvenile to modern ears. Elvis's vocal performance reveals a man trying his professional best with subpar material. His signature vocal tics are all present: the growls, the shifts from baritone to tenor, the dramatic delivery but applied to lyrics about ducks and cows. The effect is more comedic than compelling. You can almost hear the resignation in his voice as he dutifully works through verses about pigs going oink oink and chickens going cluck cluck. What makes this track particularly dated isn't just its childish content, but what it represented in Elvis's career trajectory. By 1966, popular music was evolving rapidly. The Beach Boys had released Pet Sounds. Bob Dylan had gone electric, and the Beatles were experimenting with new sounds and approaches. Meanwhile, Elvis, once the dangerous, hip-swiveling threat to American morality, was recording nursery rhymes for formulaic movies, completely disconnected from the musical revolution happening around him. The song's arrangement feels particularly antiquated, with its jaunty, almost vaudevillian feel that was already becoming passe when the track was recorded. The backing vocals, with their E-I-E-E refrains, sound overly cheerful and artificial, a world away from the more sophisticated vocal arrangements that were becoming standard in popular music of the time. Old McDonald represents a peculiar moment in American popular culture, when adult entertainers could earnestly record children's content without irony or subversion. Today, when artists venture into children's material, they typically do so with knowing winks to the adults in the room, or by forming dedicated children's music projects. Elvis's straightforward rendition of Old MacDonald lacks the self-awareness that would make such a recording palatable to modern listeners, making it sound like a relic from a distinctly different era in popular entertainment. Number 4. U.S. Mail, 1968. Have you ever heard a pun stretched into an entire song? Did men really think that aggressive possessiveness was the height of romance? Released in 1968, U.S. Mail stands as a fascinating time capsule of gender attitudes from a bygone era. The title's play on words, U.S. Mail, male, sets up the song's central conceit, Elvis portraying a territorial man warning other potential suitors to stay away from his woman, comparing himself to the Federal Mail Service, because like the Postal Service, he always delivers and can't be interfered with. The production of U.S. Mail places it squarely in the late 1960s. The twangy guitar work by Jerry Reed, who wrote the song, gives the track a country flavor that reflected Elvis's return to more rootsy sounds after years of movie soundtracks. Yet the overall sound, from the slightly compressed drums to the arrangement, feels distinctly tied to its era, lacking the timeless quality of Elvis's best work. Lyrically, U.S. Mail presents attitudes about romantic relationships that feel decidedly outdated by contemporary standards. The portrayal of women as possessions to be claimed and defended, don't tamper with the property of the U.S. Mail, reflects gender norms that society has largely moved beyond. The entire premise, a man warning off other men rather than trusting his partner's autonomy, strikes modern listeners as possessive and patriarchal. Elvis delivers a song with a swaggering bravado that was part of his appeal, but the character he portrays comes across as more threatening than charming to today's audience. Lines like, "So if you're contemplating tampering with the U.S. Mail, you better look out pale. You're gonna get your jail," contained an edge that might have seemed playfully masculine in 1968, but now reads as uncomfortable possessiveness. The wordplay throughout the song, built entirely around the male homophone, feels labored and one-dimensional by today's songwriting standards. Modern listeners accustomed to more sophisticated lyrical approaches might find the extended metaphor tiresome after the first verse. Yet the song continues to hammer the same comparison throughout its duration. Musically, while the performance is solid, the arrangement lacks the timeless quality found in Elvis's most enduring work. The backing vocals in particular have that distinct late 1960s country pop sound that immediately places the recording in its specific time period. The spoken word sections, delivered in Elvis's exaggerated drawl, compound the dated quality of the overall production. U.S. Mail reached pound 28 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1968. Respectable, but not spectacular. Its moderate success suggests that even at the time it didn't connect as powerfully as Elvis's greatest hits. Today it serves as an interesting peccade of changing gender politics and romantic expectations, a song that captures attitudes that were once mainstream, but have since been largely rejected in favor of more equitable views of relationships. Number 5. Clean Up Your Own Backyard, 1969. When's the last time you heard a pop song disguised as social commentary that actually said nothing at all? How did Elvis manage to address the turbulent late 1960s without taking any discernible stand? As the 1960s drew to a close, America was experiencing profound social upheaval. The civil rights movement, anti-war protests, and counterculture were reshaping society. Many artists responded with pointed social commentary, from Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" to John Lennon's "Give Peace a Chance." Elvis's contribution to this cultural moment was "Clean Up Your Own Backyard" from the soundtrack of his film The Trouble with Girls, and the contrast could hardly be more stark. The production of "Clean Up Your Own Backyard" bears all the hallmarks of late 1960s pop, with horns, electric guitars, and a driving rhythm section. Yet compared to the innovative production happening elsewhere in popular music at the time, the studio experimentations of the Beatles, the raw power of emerging rock acts, Elvis's track sounds formulaic and conventional. The backing vocals in particular have that distinctly variety show quality that was already beginning to sound dated even in 1969. Lyrically, the song attempts to address the social consciousness of the era, but does so with vague platitudes rather than specific commentary. The central message, essentially mind your own business, feels particularly hollow coming at a time when collective action was driving meaningful social change. Lines like, "Keep some oil in your lamp," "Keep some money in your purse," offer generic life advice, rather than engaging with the genuine issues of the day. The song's attempt at social relevance is further undermined by its placement in a lightweight musical comedy film. While artists like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez were using their platforms to address serious issues, Elvis was delivering watered-down social commentary in a movie that few people saw or remembered. This context only emphasizes how disconnected Elvis had become from the cultural vanguard that he once led. Elvis's vocal performance is professional, but lacks the fire and conviction that made his earlier work so revolutionary. You can hear him going through the motions, delivering the lyrics without seeming to connect with their meaning. This perfunctory quality stands in stark contrast to the passionate, committed performances being delivered by his contemporaries who were genuinely engaged with the social movements of the time. What makes "Clean Up Your Own Backyard" sound particularly dated isn't just its production values or lyrical approach, but its political timidity. In trying to acknowledge the social consciousness of the late 1960s without alienating any portion of Elvis's audience, the song ends up saying essentially nothing of substance. This fence-sitting approach feels especially antiquated in today's world, where artists are generally expected to take clear stands on social issues that matter to them. the song peaked at pound 35 on the Billboard Hot 100, a middling performance that suggested audiences weren't particularly compelled by Elvis's attempt at relevance. Today, it stands as an example of how even the most successful artists can seem out of touch when they fail to genuinely engage with the changes happening around them. Number 6. Kissin' Cousins, 1964. Did people really make light-hearted songs about dating relatives? How did a song about romantic feelings between cousins become the title track for a major Hollywood film? The title song from Elvis's 1964 movie Kissin' Cousins stands as perhaps the most glaringly dated track in his catalog, not just for its production values, but for its entire premise. The concept of romanticizing relationships between cousins, played for light-hearted fun, feels uncomfortable and inappropriate to contemporary sensibilities, in a way that transcends mere changes in musical fashion. Kissin' Cousins features the bright, almost antiseptic production common to many mid-1960s pop recordings. The backing vocals have that distinctive ooh and ah quality that immediately places the track in its era. The instrumentation, from the tightly controlled drums to the precisely arranged guitars and horns, lacks the raw energy of Elvis's 1950s recordings or the soulful depth of his later work, leaving the song sounding like a product of the music industry assembly line that dominated much of the early to mid-1960s. Lyrically, the song celebrates the idea of romantic and physical relationships between cousins, a concept that has become increasingly taboo in modern Western culture. Lines like, "Well, I got a gal, she's as cute as she can be, she's a distant cousin but she's not too distant with me," were played for laughs in 1964 but strike modern listeners as uncomfortable at best. The cavalier attitude toward what would now be considered inappropriate familial relationships reflects very different social norms and boundaries. Elvis delivers the song with his characteristic vocal prowess, but there's a sense that even he isn't fully invested in the material. The performance is professional, but lacks the passion and conviction of his best work. This was increasingly common during his movie years, when commercial considerations often trumped artistic integrity. The historical context of Kissin' Cousins makes its dated quality even more apparent. Released the same year the Beatles conquered America and fundamentally changed popular music, the song represents the old guard of the entertainment industry trying to maintain the status quo. While younger artists were pushing boundaries and reflecting the rapidly changing social landscape, Elvis was trapped in formulaic movies with equally formulaic soundtracks. The film itself, in which Elvis played dual roles, including a blonde country cousin, was part of the cycle of increasingly low-budget, quickly produced movies that damaged Elvis's artistic credibility during the 1960s. The song's association with this career low point only enhances its reputation as an example of Elvis at his least relevant and most commercially calculated. Kissin' Cousins reached pound 12 on the Billboard Hot 100, a respectable showing that demonstrated Elvis's enduring commercial appeal even with subpar material. Today, however, the song feels like a relic of a different time, not just musically but culturally and socially. Its casual treatment of cousin relationships as romantic fodder makes it perhaps the Elvis track least likely to receive radio airplay or inclusion on streaming pleatpins in the modern era. Number 7. Song of the Shrimp, 1962. Have you ever heard a grown man sing a first-person narrative from the perspective of a shrimp? Would any serious recording artist today release a song about a shrimp's journey to being eaten? Among Elvis Presley's extensive catalog, few songs demonstrate the artistic compromises of his Hollywood years more clearly than Song of the Shrimp. Featured in his 1962 film, Girls, Girls, Girls. This peculiar track tells the life story of a shrimp, from its carefree days in the ocean to being caught, cooked, and eaten. All from the shrimp's perspective. The production of Song of the Shrimp epitomizes early 1960s Hollywood music, clean, precise, and utterly devoid of the raw energy that made Elvis a revolutionary force just a few years earlier. The arrangement attempts to create an oceanic atmosphere through the use of harp, glissandos, marimba, and sound effects that would feel more at home in a children's television program than a record by the king of rock and roll. The backing vocals add an almost choral quality that further distances the track from anything resembling authentic rock music. Lyrically, the song represents, perhaps, the nadir of what Elvis was asked to record during his movie career. Lines like, "I'm a little shrimp who swims in the sea. There are millions of others who look just like me," feel more appropriate for a children's educational program than a recording by the man who scandalized America with Hound Dog just a few years earlier. The lyrics personify the shrimp throughout its journey to the dinner plate, creating an oddly morbid narrative as the protagonist ends up being eaten. Elvis performs the song with a straight-faced professionalism that makes it even more jarring to modern ears. There's no wink to the audience, no acknowledgement of the song's absurdity. Just Elvis Presley, one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, earnestly singing about life from a crustacean's point of view. This lack of irony or self-awareness makes the track feel especially dated, as contemporary artists would likely approach such material with a degree of camp or knowing humor. The song represents a particularly low point in the artistic compromise that characterized much of Elvis's 1960s output. While he had revolutionized popular music in the 1950s and would later experience a career renaissance with his 1968 comeback special and subsequent work, this middle period found Elvis increasingly disconnected. As Bob Dylan was writing "Blowin' in the Wind" and the Beach Boys were crafting "Surfin' Safari," Elvis was recording songs from the perspective of seafood. Song of the Shrimp never charted as a single, and it's easy to understand why. Even by the standards of the time, it was a novelty track buried in a movie soundtrack. Today it sounds like a relic from another world, a perfect example of the bizarre material that even the biggest stars could be asked to record during the studio system era of Hollywood filmmaking. Number 8. No Room to Rumba in a Sports Car. 1963. Is this the most specific musical complaint ever recorded? Did people in the 1960s really struggle with the lack of dancing space in their vehicles? If you were searching for the epitome of dated novelty songs in Elvis's catalog, No Room to Rumba in a Sports Car, from the 1963 film Fun in Acapulco, would be a strong contender. This track combines several elements that firmly anchor it to its era: an obsession with sports cars as status symbols, the rumba as a dance craze, and the kind of situational comedy that characterized many pop songs of the early 1960s. The production of the track immediately places it in its early 1960s context. The Latin-influenced percussion, intended to evoke the Mexican setting of the film, sounds like a Hollywood approximation of authentic Latin rhythms, Sinehide and simplified for mainstream American audiences. The horns and strings have that distinct early 1960s quality, bright, controlled, and arranged with a precision that leaves little room for spontaneity or raw emotion. The overall sound is clean but sterile, lacking the organic quality that characterizes timeless recordings. Lyrically, the song revolves entirely around the simple premise established in its title. The narrator can't dance the rumba with his girlfriend in his small sports car. This trivial complaint stretches across multiple verses without developing any deeper meaning or resonance. Lines like, "We used to rumba in a great big Cadillac, but now we're sitting in a little old sports car. There's no room to move. We're packed like sardines," reflect the consumer culture and status consciousness of the early 1960s while offering little of substance beneath the surface. Elvis delivers the song with his typical professional polish, but there's an undeniable sense that he's simply going through the motions. The performance lacks the passion and investment that characterized his best work, suggesting that even Elvis himself didn't find much of value in the material. This perfunctory quality only enhances how dated the track sounds to modern ears. The song's fixation on the rumba, a dance that had its mainstream American heyday in the 1940s and 1950s, already felt somewhat anachronistic even in 1963. By the time Elvis recorded this track, newer dances like the twist were dominating youth culture. This slightly out-of-touch quality reflects how Elvis's movie soundtracks often lagged behind current trends, contributing to his temporary decline in cultural relevance during this period. No Room to Rumba in a Sports Car wasn't released as a single and remained album track ephemera, which is unsurprising given its limited appeal. Today, it serves primarily as an beckett of a specific moment in Elvis's career, when commercial considerations consistently trumped artistic integrity. The track represents everything that makes certain portions of Elvis's catalog sound dated: contrived situations, superficial concerns, and production that prioritized glossy professionalism over authentic emotion or musical innovation. So, which Elvis songs do you think have aged the worst? Do these dated tracks diminish his legacy, or simply highlight how revolutionary his best work truly was?